Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming by. Those of you that are here and those of you that have yet to arrive. I'll be reading some more of M. Kingsley's Drawing of the Soul today. I do hope that you'll enjoy. I know I certainly will. I'm going to try to get at least a couple of chapters done, or an hour. That is what I'm shooting for. One of those two. Let's face it, my live streams have been rather combative with me, to say the least, lately. So I'm going to try to fix that today and make up for it and get some things done. That said, hello, Study Hard. Okay. I do not know if you are the only one here. I would expect the author might be here as well. Hmm. Well, we'll get started in a moment anyway. So I believe we're on chapter. Let's see here. Chapter 2 for Jared. If we are not, please feel free to correct me. I will be interacting with chat a little less than usual because book stories are far superior to anything I have to say. So, without further ado. Something to add, Mr. Faulkner? The professor asked. The whole class chuckled in the aftermath from the head-to-desk collision, looking intently at either the professor or Jared. Rubbing his head to minimize the pain, Jared grinned sheepishly. The fresh air of the room was a welcome change from the rank scene in his dream. No, Professor. Sorry. He half laughed. Then, with all your published prowess, maybe you could enlighten us with your thoughts on the reading assignment for today. What do you think is the connection between Scott Bell's experience in the subway station and real life? Professor never let pass an opportunity to drop the fact that Jared had self-published a book. Well, the situation was about Josh Bell, a famous violinist. He played to a sellout crowd in New York 3 nights in a row. Jared tried to smile, but he knew he was in hot water. And, yes, after this, he agreed to play in one of the busiest subway terminals in the city as a social experiment, a girl on Jared's left chimed in. For a week or so he played, demonstrating true mastery of musical talent. But only a handful of people stopped to listen to his music. The article portrays, very nicely I might add, the fact that we pass by extraordinary things each day on our way to accomplish mediocre tasks. Jared was almost sweating. He had never fallen asleep in class before, let alone let his head fall forward and collide with a desk. He knew the writing professor liked him, but Papke never looked kindly on students using his class for recreational resting. And Jared figured that's why he had been put on the spot. Interesting analysis. Any other comments? Professor Papke turned the question to the rest of the class before giving Jared a short look. Jared gave a silent sigh of relief. He loved to write. Short stories, poems, extended narratives. He even written and published his own book. It wasn't a well-known book, but its popularity was gaining steam by the time Jared was halfway through college. Never really trusting writing as a profession, Jared chose engineering as his educational focus. He loved learning how things worked, and first he had narrowed his choices down to either nursing or engineering. Then, not specifically liking the idea of lifting people in and out of the tub, he picked engineering. When the class ended, a friend leaned over. Well done on the nap, Faulkner. Since when did you ever sleep in class? Late night excursions got you drained? A friendly elbow to Jared's forearm carried the point. I've been having the weirdest dreams, John. Jared shook his head, still trying to lose the cobwebs. Maybe I'm just worried about finals. I'm going to pause for a moment to address Study Hard's comment. Study Hard. Actually, this is written by one of my Discord server's members' spouses. Interesting fact. I will pass on the praise for you. Yeah, whatever, Romeo, John stated in his thick Western accent. Oh, Western. Yeah, whatever, Romeo. In his thick Western accent, rolling his eyes. I don't know if that was Western. Was that Western? Did I just butcher Western? Anyway, sorry. Jared disliked the uncommon nickname. Having never really gotten a girl, let alone the girl, even in his published book, the guy couldn't figure out how to get the girl. Walking out of the big glass double doors of Benson Building, the winter air felt like a kick in the guts, stealing his breath away, much like the weather in his dream. A small, pale brown, bushy tail disappeared into the bushes on Jared's right. Assuming to be just a squirrel, he paid it no mind. Cold day, he grumbled, heading up the hill toward his apartment complex, choosing to go through the Taylor building to save warmth. Unfortunately, being the centermost building of the campus, it drew a majority of students who shared Jared's desire to filter through the white brick hallways as opposed to the deep snow. Closely packing in, the mass of students attempted to stay away from the artwork covering the white brick walls. Jared attempted to cut through the crowd of college students as quickly as possible, quelling the urge to moo loudly or flop around like a salmon heading upriver. "Faulkner!" a voice called from behind him, just as he came close to the exit. Turning quickly to locate the owner of the voice, Jared was pushed toward the double doors. "I'm here," he called back to the voice. "Ack, you people are getting on my... Ugh. I'll meet you outside." A short girl reading in front of him had her nose in a book, much like I am right now, as she moved with the crowd. Her coiling blonde hair flung down over her shoulders. But at the name Faulkner, her head flung up and spun from side to side, her hair now wildly flowing. She then halted at Jared's response, rounding on him with her eyes wide. "You're J.R. Faulkner!" She grabbed his hand and shook it spastically. Jared started a little. This wasn't the first time he'd been recognized on the campus for his book. It was the second. "Well, hi," he said, and extended his hand. Yes, I am. Can I assume you like my book?" "Very much," she spouted. At this point, Jared became aware that foot traffic was backing up and slowly closing in on him. "I'm so glad," he said happily, then pointed to the exit. "But I have to get to my next class. Please excuse me." I'm sorry, that was not in the text. I apologize. That was just how I would handle it, I suppose. I'm sorry. The girl was visibly disappointed. Well, how when I say how I would have handled it, I mean how I would have expressed that thought as a person interacting with normal people. Because I don't know how to interact with normal people. The girl was visibly disappointed, but she nodded as Jared left the flow of the crowd and let the flow of the crowd move him through the exit. Once outside, Jared jumped out of the line with a phew, and after dusting himself off, he waited to meet. Kingsley actually is an author. This is an actual book. The thumbnail is actually a picture of the book. Sorry. It is actually something that you can purchase, and I do heavily encourage you to do so if that is something you are inclined and have the funding to do. Once outside, Jared jumped out of the line with a few, and dusting himself off, he waited to meet the owner of the voice who had called him by Faulkner. He already knew who it would be. Only a few people strictly called him by his last name, and only one would use that tone of voice. He waited near the exit, off to the side, not wanting to be caught off guard. Then it occurred to him that his back was unprotected. A hand suddenly grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around. A large fist rocketed towards Jared's face. A 5'11" 270-pound, sandy, brown-haired man was standing there. Out of reflex, Jared continued to turn and bend back, allowing the fist to move past his face. Then he grabbed and twisted the flying hand, forcing the attacker to his knees. Wow, that's new. "Hi, Drayle," he said cheerfully. This ritual of sparring was one of Jared's weekly highlights. "Where'd you learn that, Faulkner?" the subdued attacker grunted. Jared immediately released his friend and helped him to his feet. "Maybe I'm just good like that. Where are you off to?" "You've never moved like that before." "Anyway, I've got a graphics class to get to," Drayle said. Reader's note. I find it very interesting that a graphics student is into combat of any martial sort. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about breaking stereotypes and proving people's preconceived notions to be incorrect. However, I would say that, well, I guess my whole thing is, I have a theory as to what might be going on. But I think I'll keep it to myself. Let us just say that I find it very curious that a graphics student would be into the martial arts. Sorry, you never moved like that before. Anyway, I've got a graphics class to get to, Drayle said. But I couldn't help but surprise you. We haven't sparred in a while. We'll have to do this again later. Jared laughed and slapped Drayle on the shoulder. Wouldn't miss it. We'll see you at the birthday party tonight, right? I'll be there. Tell Arya hi for me, Jared said. They said goodbye again and parted ways with a fist bump. Jared noticed the stream of students and had started thinning. He walked southeast, up the hill, through the decorative gardens, and beside the Rick's building. He walked past a group of cute girls and tipped an imaginary hat to all of them. The girls giggled and chatted away as they passed him. He then trotted up through the parking lot. Off to the side, over the large hill, there came a large roaring noise. At first he thought it was a semi-truck grinding on its hydraulic brakes, but the noise carried for a good 5 or 6 seconds, and the only things beyond the top of the hill were rural houses and farmland. There was also a flash of light which appeared out of the corner of Jared's right eye. But when he turned his head, the noise stopped, and the hill looked peaceful and orange where the sun would soon be setting on this short winter's day. Focusing directly on the hill, his breath ceased. He was completely still, waiting for something to happen. After a few seconds, Jared looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but the other people in the parking lot were all too concerned with the steadily increasing snowfall. The cold lessened in its bite, but Jared could see his breath more prominently. The rest of the walk up to the Aspen Apartments was uneventful, but Jared wished for a bottle of water to get the bitter taste out of his mouth. Upon entering the apartment, he discovered his roommates were gone, and the front room was a mess. Just what I need, Jared sighed as he walked past the couch to his bedroom. the first on the left. Entering the room, Jared was reminded of an icebox, as he removed his winter jacket, hat, and gloves. I think I read that right. The words are starting to get a little blurry. Just rub my eyes a little bit here, sorry. He turned on the space heater before walking across the hall and the split bathroom. The toilet and shower beyond the door, while the two sinks were adjacent to the hallway, with a large mirror on the wall above them. He turned the hot water on and started... my eyes. Hold on. I beg pardon. There we go. There we go. I apologize. I don't blink nearly enough when I read. Started shaving the bits of stubble from his face. Within 5 minutes, his head was completely hairless, save for the eyebrows. It had been a year or so since his hair had run away from his head, and only unsightly stragglers left. The man in the mirror was a bald, gray-eyed, 6-foot, 175-pound man with a blind left eye. He reached for a towel to clean off the remainder of the shaving evidence and leaned down, rinsing his face in the water. When he was scrubbing his head with a towel, Jared heard a tapping noise. He wouldn't have thought anything of it, but the feeling of being watched sent tingles up his spine. Lowering the towel, Jared quietly looked over his shoulder, seeing only an empty hallway. Jared shook off the feeling and turned back to the mirror. The man staring at him through the glass was not the same one who had been there a moment earlier. Bah! Jared recoiled out of reflex. The head was still bald, but the face in the mirror was years older than Jared, and bore a white, almost glowing tribal tattoo below the left eye. A crescent ran along the upper ridge of the cheek, with 3 small triangles running at tangent angles. Wait, all right. Beg pardon? Is there something going on in chat that I missed? Yeah, I'll keep reading until I hear otherwise. Sorry. A crescent ran along the upper ridge of the cheek, with 3 small triangles running at tangent angles to it, pointing downward. But it was the eyes that startled Jared most. Bright electric blue with thin pupils like those of a cat, ready to catch its prey. And the reflection was grinning. Jared's shoulder collided with the hall-side doorway, knocking him off balance. He fell back into the hallway, grabbing onto the doorway and catching himself from meeting the floor. Confusion swam through his mind as he scrambled back to the mirror. The man with the tattoo no longer stared back at him, but Jared inspected the glass for a good 30 seconds before accepting its current occupant. He leaned over the sink again, this time almost nose to nose with the face in the mirror. You stay put. I'm in no mood to go crazy today. Once he was done at the sink, Jared returned to his room for some homework before the birthday party at the Cranes. The room had gained an almost uncomfortable temperature. Gained an almost comfortable temperature due to the space heater. He rummaged around in the closet until he found his clothes for the party and changed before beginning homework. Sitting at his desk, Jared tried to study. His mind, however, wandered back to the dream. Celix and Sage were characters from the book he had written, but the scene from the frozen village was not. The idea was a good one, but the image of the dragon in the cave was terrifying. Eyes sunken, rotting gray scales. But it was the odor that still had the faintest presence in the room in such a way that Jared pondered if it was still on his clothes. He also hadn't given Sage an undying hatred of Rinsith. What was that about? Jared's mind continued its tangent tangential. Sorry, that is a word I have not heard pronounced before. Course for a good hour. Realizing the homework in front of him was only half completed, he looked at the clock. 5:03 p.m. Shoot, I better get going or I'll be late, he muttered, before sprinting for the door. There was an old saying he learned as a child. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're toast. Hello to everyone in chat. I will address. I'll say hello after we're done with this chapter. I think I'll be able to squeeze in at least one more, if that's okay with the author. Let's see. The Cranes and the Thindoos were Jared's best friends in Rexburg. He had first known Tiberius, Crane as Tiberius. I love history. Crane is a member of the same 2-year service-based mission in the smaller towns of Idaho. They had worked as partners for about 5 months, and Ty had convinced Jared to come to college out here. Chloe Crane stood at about 4 feet 11 inches tall, about 180 pounds soaking wet, and with the sweetest temperament. I can't read. My vision's going a little blurry. Let me blink a few more times. Sorry. Sweetest temperament until you pissed her off. Then you could say the personality matched the dark crimson red hair. Jared met her in person when he first came up to Rexburg, investigating the possibility of pursuing his education at RIU. She had been sitting in Ty's lap, feeding him grapes. Jared couldn't remember if the grapes were specifically part of the memory, but he figured that Chloe could have fed Ty scorpions as long as she was in his lap. That's funny. I'm sorry. The Cranes lived about a mile away from Jared on the same road as he crossed over to get to his apartment. The only reason he drove instead of walked was that it was all downhill to their house, which meant uphill all the way back. Their apartment sat in the basement apartment of a laundromat and a sewing store. The entrance was just around the corner from the parking at the back of the building. Jared hardly ever knocked on the door anymore due to his joining the Cranes for meals every day. He had been splitting groceries with them ever since his roommates decided to use his food more than their own. But today was Ty's birthday, and Jared didn't want to interrupt any private celebration. Reaching the door, he pressed down on the button and held it for a couple of seconds before releasing it. He had always found it entertaining to prolong the doorbell, though when asked, he couldn't say why. But, oh wait, where was I? I had to put the book down for a second. Let me take a quick peek at something. Ooh, I might only be able to squeeze in one chapter. Yeah, okay, sorry. One chapter. I apologize, everyone, because it is a little bit further along than I thought. I apologize. Let's see. Through the window in the door, Jared saw a head poke around the corner of the downstairs entrance. Then a small figure bolted up the stairs to let him in. "Faulkner!" Chloe shrieked, launching herself at his chest with a bear hug. But, being 4'11", her force hit him square in the stomach, almost knocking him clean over. The wind was forced out of Jared as a small attacker held him in a tight hug. Coming up the stairs, Ty chuckled at Jared's predicament. "Howdy, Faulkner." Hi. Ty, a little help here?" He spoke between grunts, flailing his half-free hands. "Chloe, I think you're cutting off his hair," Tiberius said in a casual tone, placing a hand on Chloe's shoulder. After a moment, she released Jared and threw her arms around Ty, giving him a big kiss. "Happy birthday, hairy man," Jared said, patting Ty on his round belly, and slipping by them to go inside and down the stairs. "Hey," Ty spouted. He'd have thrown more comments after his friend, but Chloe regained his attention by pulling his face back to her own. Knowing to not wait for his friends, Jared went inside and saw the decorations Chloe had set up in the small apartment. There was a Star Trek cake. Live long and prosper, everyone. Sorry, that's not in the book. Star Trek cake on the table and a few stuffed tribbles here and there. Ty was a hardcore Trekkie, owning every Trek series and movie. Jared had actually seen almost all of the collection by this time, but he avidly avoided the original series. "I must keep some plausible deniability according to Star Trek," he would tell his friends. After a minute or so of necking on the street, Ty and Chloe joined Jared downstairs. Jared had taken the liberty of doing the few dishes in the sink while waiting for them and was pretty much done. "Ah, thanks, Faulkner. He didn't have to do that," Chloe said cheerfully. Jared's eyes darted from side to side. "That's right. I'm just doing dishes," he spoke swiftly. "I wasn't spying on the cake or presents or the pizza in the oven." "Oh no, you didn't!" She covered the distance to him in an instant, grabbing the fly swatter in the dining room wall, intent on driving Jared out of the kitchen. "Out! Out! Out!" Her eyes were full of indignation, but her teeth betrayed the widest of grins. Jared grabbed a nearby dish towel to defend himself and tried to retreat, managing to get past Chloe with only a single strike from the swatter landing on his arm. "Ah!" Jared fell backwards over the rear of the couch in his kitchen withdrawal. Twisting in descent, he landed in a haphazard prone position. "So," he explained to Ty, drying his hands in the blue hand towel, "what's the plan?" Chloe busted out laughing so hard she started gasping for air between high-pitched cackles. Taking the scene, Ty laughed himself before answering. Dr. Ha, Drail, and Ara will still be here. Oh, I'm sorry, I see. Drail and Ara will be here soon. There we go. And then we can do cake, presents, and games. Whichever you want to do first, dear. Chloe darted around the couch and flung herself into Ty's lap, forcing a large grunt from her husband. Jared shook his head. "You two are incorrigible." "Don't worry, Faulkner. When you get a girl, you do all this mushy stuff," Ty smirked. Cuddling up to Chloe with an evil grin, he then shrieked and ducked as the wet dish towel flew over his head. Chloe yelped as Ty attempted to hide behind her, but after the towel hit the wall opposite Jared, she laughed at her husband. "Oh, you big baby," she said, patting his face with a pitying grin. Ding dong. "Saved by the bell, birthday boy," Jared quipped, hopping up from the couch and walking to the door. But Chloe expanded Ty's comment. "I could use another girl to hang out with, so let's get that going, yeah?" "Drail! Arya!" Jared shouted up the stairs, ignoring the comment. "Faulkner!" they responded in unison, descending the stairs, each giving him a one-armed hug. Arya, because she didn't want to risk dropping her weekly literary fix, and Drail because, masculinity. Oh, that is funny. I love that one. "Long time no see," Drail said. Yes, the question mark's there. That's why that was not me coughing. I was trying to put question mark there. Sorry. "Yeah, always good to see you without a weapon in hand, Drail." "I hate you," his friend retorted with a grin. Jared had stepped back into the apartment, also grinning widely. "Arya," Chloe spoke in her usual high-pitched voice, leaping from Ty's lap to hug her best friend. The overreaction to each other was a well-known ritual at any gathering, be it planned or impromptu. Arya, in turn, repeated the high-pitched voice as she accepted the hug of the short, red-haired woman. Arya's long, sandy brown hair was pulled into a tight ponytail. Practical, librarian-esque, glasses framed her vibrant green eyes. Drayle exchanged fist bumps with Ty, pulled a present from his overcoat. Sorry. Happy birthday, Ty. Thanks, Drayle. What is it? Ty asked, giving the small box a shake, a mischievous look in his eyes. Aha! Chloe grabbed the object out of Ty's grasp. After cake, love, she smiled. Ty was not enthused at his wife's statement, but fortunately dinner didn't last long, at which point Chloe relented and let the presents be opened during cake. After the cake and games were finished, Jared was on the floor, leaning against the pillar that had divided the kitchen from the living room. He noticed his pants felt a little tight after all the food. Boy, that was some of the best cake ever, Chloe, he groaned. Ugh, I may need to be rolled home. Oh, Drayle perked up. Does that mean we can borrow your car tonight, Jared? Drayle's wife, Arya, giggled at the comment with a cheery, Indeed. Let me think. Jared put his hand back against the column, closing his eyes. No. A wide grin crossed his face. You jerk. Drayle chuckled. You know y'all are my favorite. Jared's grin widened. I'll be happy to give you a ride home. Very kind, thank you. Wait. Very kind, thank you. That was not an old English accent. I apologize. Arya said in an old English accent, I can't do old English. What is old? I can't do old English, I'm sorry. Dang. I'm flubbing this badly. I'm sorry. Oh, my pleasure, but it's getting a little late, so if you want to hitch a ride, we should be off. Great, they said together, and the goodbyes lasted a few more minutes before the party officially ended. As Jared pulled up to the Thindo's apartment, several small figures ran through the street in front of the car. Arya and Drayle saw them, but Jared was fiddling with his car radio. Did you guys see that? Arya's voice broke to silence. What? Jared looked up, stepping on the brakes harder than he expected. The car fishtailed slightly, coming to a stop. I saw a group of children across the street just there. I swear I did. I did too, Drayle furrowed his brow. Kids really shouldn't be out this late. Jared couldn't resist. Maybe Rexburg has a new roving gang of carnivorous pygmies. Love that. But what happened to the old gang of carnivorous pygmies? Drayle retorted. They ate them, I bet. Before Jared could continue, he noticed Arya giving a slight shiver, so he said nothing. Oh. Her dreams had housed that very scenario twice in the last week. The fact that her previous weekly read was Lord of the Flies didn't help either. Ooh, Lord of the Flies. That, ooh. 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 Just, ooh. Lord of the Flies is rough. Drayle consoled his sweetheart, and pleasantries were exchanged as the Thinados left the car and walked up to their apartment. After looking at the dashboard clock, 11:30 p.m., Jared headed to the east side of the campus and up the hill southward toward his apartment. The road was covered in a few inches of snow, and flakes were still falling. The blackness at the top of the hill seemed more ominous than normal. Ominous. How come I can't say that word now? And as Jared turned into the parking lot, there were odd marks in the snow leading toward the crest of the hill. The heck are those? Jared asked aloud. After parking the car, he went back to the street to examine the marks. A small plopping noise caught his attention. Looking to the side, Jared saw a pale squirrel sitting atop a car, having dropped from a low tree branch. Watching him for a moment before scampering off in the opposite direction. Once the squirrel disappeared from sight, Jared went back to looking for the indents in the snow. The wind had completely died, and the snowfall had picked up in thickness. When he found the most detailed mark, Jared knelt in the snow to get a better look. The lamppost gave slight illumination to the white powder, but the detail of the mark made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The only time that Jared had seen a print like that had been in a museum. It looked like the print of a large lizard, which wouldn't have meant much, except there was a lot more, all leading up and over the crest of the hill. Oh, pink? Oh, pink? Thank you. I am sorry. Am I missing details? Am I missing words? I apologize. Whoa. Jared followed the snowy tracks up the apartment complex. He had retrieved his walking stick from his car for leverage on the sleek ice located beneath the 5 inches of snow. The density of the white flakes. Oh, okay. Thank you. I will not tell anybody. Well, anyone who doesn't watch this stream and see chat. Jared followed the snowy tracks up through the apartment complex. He had retrieved his walking stick from the snow for leverage on the slick ice located beneath the 5 inches of snow. The density of the white flakes in the air grew thicker as he passed the complex next to his own, the snowfall muffling all sound around him. No, you're not distracting. What made these? His apprehension mixed with the silent, snow-filled air pressed in on him. The prints on the snow were still fairly well defined, being several feet in diameter. Following the prints a good 100 yards, Jared decided it was way too silent for his liking. He passed a tall mound in the snow that reminded him of the frozen people from his dream, so he started mentally going over the material for his upcoming engineering exam as a distraction. Focusing on data that never really comforted him, but there wasn't much else he could think of. He went over the material RPM tables for the lathe, then the depth of cut requirements for gaining the desired finish. Jared was in the middle of drafting procedures when he turned to make sure he could find his way back and realized he couldn't make out the lights of his apartment complex. The only thing helping him keep his bearings in the snow was knowing Rexburg was downhill. He came up to the second mound that was probably a mailbox. However, Jared's imagination started getting the better of him. Hey, look, another villager you couldn't save. With this thought, Jared looked down at the print in front of him, but it was gone, though his own prints were still there. After looking around at the immediate vicinity, he figured it was probably for the best. Who in their right mind wants to go looking for creatures that had feet like that? A sound cut through the silence, and Jared recognized it as one of the ringtones on his phone. He bobbed his head up and down a couple times with the music before answering it. Hello? Hello? He repeated. The reception was bad with some hissing and static. Where are you? Jared? The voice on the phone was Ty's. What do you mean? I'm just taking a walk in that field south of the campus. For 3 hours? What do you mean 3 hours? Jared looked at his phone to see the time. I left you about 20 minutes ago. There was a big zero where the one had just been. Shaking his head for a moment, Jared pulled himself back to reality. It doesn't matter. What's up, Ty? You forgot your wallet, and I brought it to your apartment about 20 minutes after you left, but you weren't there, so I left you a note and came home. Chloe's worried you hadn't called back yet. What have you been doing? Jared opened his mouth to tell Ty about the tracks and closed it again. His friend had big imaginations, but he was sure they wouldn't believe he had been following giant lizard tracks for 3 hours. So he picked Plan B. It's a long story, Ty. I'll come get it from you in the morning. Cool? Alright. Okay, bro. Are you sure you're okay? Oh yeah, perfectly fine. Jared had no idea how he was going to explain the situation in the morning. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, he hung up the phone and focused on getting the phone back. Finding his way back to Aspen was not a picnic at first, due to the density of the snow, but after 30 minutes or so, with clothes soaked through, Jared stumbled into the dark apartment. Flicking the switch did nothing, and he swore under his breath. Jared felt around for his flashlight. Anybody home? Nothing. Hello? Silence. Turning on the flashlight, he saw the apartment was missing his roommate's big screen, both couches, and the kitchen table. Then checking the rooms, Jared saw that all three of his roommates had packed up and left. So they all decided to clean up and leave while I was gone. The question was aimed at the darkness around him. His voice echoed in the empty apartment. Looking through the window was futile. Just like resistance. The snowfall was too dense for him to see, not to mention the lack of light anywhere in the distance. May as well get some shut-eye, Jared said to the cold darkness around him. Probably just another power outage. With the strange events in the evening, fresh paranoia took over, causing him to search the apartment one more time to make sure he didn't have some unwanted visitors. As he scanned the bare common room for the second time, a glint in the corner caught his eye when the flashlight swept across the floor. It was a small golden ring with odd bright green tribal markings wrapped around its circumference and around the deeply mounted emerald. The ring reminded him of an artifact in the book he had written, the Ring of Kronos. In his book, the ring gave its wearer the ability to move an incredible distance in the blink of an eye. Jared had called it shifting. Now that's creepy, Jared said in confusion. A growing pain started to pulse behind his eye, and he couldn't help thinking out loud. I wish reality would come back to itself. My brain can't take much more of this. Jared rubbed his temple. This has to be a bad dream, he muttered, carrying the ring to his bedroom. I'll go to bed, and this will be gone in the morning. Placing it on his end table, Jared stripped down to his undergarments before collapsing on the bed, exhausted. And that, everyone, is Chapter 2. I want to thank everyone, especially the author and the family of the author, for allowing me to read this for all of you today. For those of you who like the story, I heavily encourage you to go pick up a copy. I myself am reading this blind, so you get my true reactions. But maybe you'd like to see what's coming up before I get there. Assuming that I'm allowed to read any further, of course. Anyway, with that, thank you all very much. I hope you all have a wonderful night. And be well, my little sugar plum.